When Karen banned my nephew from using the community pool, I didn't even know her name. 6 months later, I knew her bank account numbers and every dirty secret she'd tried to bury. That transformation from clueless neighbor to full-blown investigator started the morning she decided to weaponize the police against me. It was 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was standing in my doorway in a bathrobe, coffee steaming in my hand, facing 2 confused police officers and 1 woman in tennis whites, smiling like she'd already won. The smell of my dark roast mixed with her overwhelming vanilla perfume. I remember thinking, this isn't about pool rules anymore. My name is Dave Martinez, and 8 months ago I thought I was moving to paradise. Willowbrook Estates, 127 pristine homes, manicured lawns, and a community pool that shimmered like a jewel every sunrise. I paid extra for the corner lot with a pool view, $750,000 when others were going for $650,000. After losing my wife Sarah to cancer, I needed peace, a clean start. I retired from 20 years of construction law, packed up the house we'd shared for 2 decades, and came here to heal. Every morning I'd sit in my kitchen with my coffee, watching the sunlight bounce off that turquoise water, hearing the faint slap-slap of early swimmers cutting through the calm. It felt like meditation. Exactly what my grief counselor said I needed, and that's when I first saw her. Karen Mitchell, 48, real estate agent, HOA vice president, queen of Willowbrook. Always dressed like she stepped out of a catalog. Designer athleisure, perfect highlights, clipboard glued to her hand. Her husband Brad was a city councilman, which meant she walked like she owned the place, and maybe, in her mind, she did. At first, I didn't pay her any mind. She waved once from across the pool deck, that tight smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. For months, life was peaceful. I followed every rule, kept my lawn trimmed exactly to HOA standards, garbage bins hidden, driveway spotless. The quiet started to heal something in me. Then summer came, and with it, my nephew Miguel, 16, smart, respectful, the closest thing I had to a son. My brother's kid from Phoenix. He'd come to stay with me for the summer before starting his engineering degree. He worked part-time at the hardware store and spent the rest of his days keeping this lonely old man company. The trouble started one Tuesday in June. Miguel had invited 2 friends from work over for a swim. They were good kids, polite, clean-cut, the kind that said, "Thank you, Mr. Martinez," without being told. For an hour and a half, the pool echoed with laughter, splashes, and that easy joy I hadn't heard since Sarah was alive. Then the air changed. That sharp click of heels on concrete. The smell of vanilla perfume cutting through the chlorine. Karen appeared with her clipboard like the angel of death. "Excuse me," she announced, voice loud enough for the entire pool area to hear. "I need to see guest passes for these young men." Guest passes? I blinked. Their family, my nephew and his friends. Her smile was all teeth. "Rules are rules, Mr. Martinez. HOA bylaws state that excessive guest usage, more than 2 guests per week, requires pre-approval and registered guest passes." I offered to register them right then. She refused. "No exceptions," she snapped, consulting her clipboard like it held divine law. "Pool privileges are suspended for Lot 47 pending compliance review." The sound of shifting pool chairs filled the silence. Neighbors looked down at their phones, pretending not to watch. The smell of chlorine and tension mixed in the air. Miguel's face burned red as he gathered his towel. His friends muttered apologies. That evening, a notice appeared on the community bulletin board. "Pool privileges suspended for Lot 47 pending compliance review." Karen made an announcement at the HOA meeting too, dramatizing my supposed failure to follow protocol. Her tone dripped with fake disappointment, like a teacher scolding a child. Sitting there in the community center basement, the air stale with old coffee and carpet cleaner, I realized this wasn't about guest passes. This was about control. About showing the new guy his place. Karen's mistake was assuming I'd roll over. She didn't know I'd spent 20 years dismantling contracts and exposing fraud. 3 days later, I got a certified letter, A compliance hearing, scheduled in her dining room of all places, giving me 48 hours. Notice, the date, Sarah's birthday. I'd planned to visit her grave that evening. Instead, I was being summoned like a criminal. The letter accused me of violations. Trash cans visible from the street. They weren't. Lawn exceeding 5 inches. It measured 3. 2. And my favorite, failure to maintain community harmony through appropriate guest management. That night, I sat under the kitchen light with every HOA document spread across the table. 20 years in construction law teaches you one thing. The devil hides in the fine print. Buried on page 47 of the Community Charter, I found gold. Reasonable accommodation shall be provided for family gatherings and multi-generational household activities. Karen's rule directly violated the HOA's founding document. Even better, her letter broke 3 procedural requirements: insufficient notice, lack of bylaw reference, and hosting a hearing in a private residence without public notice. Thursday evening, I walked into Karen's house carrying a neatly tabbed folder. Lavender air freshener hit me so hard I almost coughed. Maybe it was masking the smell of guilt. Around the table sat the HOA board. Jim Walsh, a retired teacher who looked like he wanted to disappear, and Maria Santos, an accountant who took notes like she was auditing God. Karen clicked through an actual PowerPoint presentation about maintaining community standards. Every slide had a veiled jab about new residents struggling to fit in. Her manicured nails tapped against the table in rhythm with her arrogance. When she finished, I stood up. "Before we proceed," I said calmly, "I'd like to note several procedural violations. HOA business can't be conducted in a private home without community notice. This meeting violates our bylaws requiring 7 days notice. And your cited violations don't match any actual bylaw language." Quote, Jim Walsh looked up, startled. "Are you saying this hearing isn't valid?" "I'm saying if we enforce rules," I replied, "we should probably follow them ourselves." I handed Maria the highlighted charter page. Karen's face went pale. "That language is outdated," she snapped. "It's still binding until a community vote changes it," I said. "Has there been one?" Silence. That's when Karen made her second mistake. She tried to humiliate me. "Maybe Mr. Martinez is having trouble adjusting after his recent loss," she said softly, fake sympathy oozing from every word. The air turned heavy. Even her supporters shifted uncomfortably. I gathered my papers. "Thank you for your time," I said. Calm as stone. "We'll be in touch." The board voted 4-2 to uphold the ban. But something had changed. They'd seen her cruelty. That night, I opened my laptop, the screen glowing in the dark kitchen, and began to dig. Property filings, developer contracts, real estate commissions. By 2 a.m., I'd found my first thread of corruption. Karen had picked a fight with the wrong man. And this time, she wasn't just losing pool access. She was about to lose everything. 3 days after the so-called hearing, my mailbox held another certified letter, Karen's latest stunt. This time, it was an official compliance notice, accusing me of ongoing violations and demanding I attend yet another board review. I stood at my mailbox, the morning sun already baking the street, and laughed. She wasn't enforcing rules. She was building a case. By now, I'd stopped underestimating her. HOA power wasn't just petty, it was political. And Karen Mitchell played it like a professional. But she'd picked a fight with someone who knew how contracts, bylaws, and paper trails could destroy even the most polished fraud. The following weekend, Miguel and I went to Home Depot to pick up some supplies. When we returned, there was a car idling across the street, a silver SUV with tinted windows. Inside sat Karen and 2 of her neighborhood watch volunteers, clipboards in hand, watching my driveway like we were criminals. The smell of gasoline mixed with cut grass. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from anger. Within a week, she had her neighborhood watch patrol in full swing. 3 residents, all middle-aged men desperate for approval, walking the neighborhood with cameras, snapping photos of minor violations. basketball hoops visible from garages, flags an inch too long, garden gnomes that exceeded the 2-decoration limit. But I was the main attraction. Daily drive-bys, photographs taken from every angle, warning slips tucked under visitors' wipers. The tension spread faster than Texas wildfire. Neighbors started whispering. Some stopped waving. Even kids seemed to walk faster when they passed my house. That's when Maria Santos showed up at my door. She looked around nervously before stepping inside. "Dave," she said in a low voice, "there are things about the HOA's finances that don't add up." I poured her coffee, the scent filling the kitchen, and she opened her folder. Her hands trembled slightly as she showed me spreadsheets, invoices, and payment records. The numbers didn't make sense. Landscaping fees that doubled in a year. Pool maintenance contracts that charged for non-existent equipment. "I think someone's been overbilling the HOA," she whispered. "And I think it's Karen." It was like a switch flipped in my head. My grief-hollowed instincts as a lawyer came roaring back to life. That night, I set up discreet security cameras, small, motion-triggered, and perfectly legal. They captured every car that passed, every photo Karen's patrol took, every whispered confrontation she tried to spark. And then I started documenting everything. Every letter, every visit, every word she said. Here's something most people don't know. Under Texas law, HOA enforcement requires written warnings before penalties. Verbal threats don't count. Karen had already broken the law by skipping due process. 2 days later, I received a surprise visitor, Jim Walsh, the HOA president. He was a kind man, the kind who'd been a teacher too long to stomach bullying. "Dave," he said quietly, "I think she's going too far, but she's got friends on the board. People are scared." Quote. "Then let's give them something to believe in," I said. Over the next week, I built a case like I was back in court. Karen's fraudulent letters violated 3 HOA statutes. Her hearing violated notice laws. Her pool suspension ignored equal access rules. Meanwhile, Miguel, sharp as ever, began tracking Karen's social media. "Uncle Dave," he said one evening, showing me his phone, "she's posting about us. She's calling us problem residents." Her posts painted me as a troublemaker and hinted at unruly family members disrupting community harmony. The dog whistle was loud and clear. But she didn't realize screenshots never die. Then came the breaking point. Friday afternoon, clear skies, smell of barbecue drifting through the air. Miguel and 2 friends were swimming again, this time during designated family hours. I made sure they followed every rule. No guests over limit. No loud music, nothing that could be twisted. Karen arrived 15 minutes later, clipboard in one hand, camera in the other, 2 patrol volunteers trailing behind her like security guards. "Lot 47, she barked. "Exit the pool immediately. Your privileges remain suspended pending review." Miguel, calm as ever, looked up. "We're allowed here during family hours, ma'am," my uncle confirmed. Karen's nostrils flared. "Don't argue," I set out. "Now." They left quietly, towels around their shoulders. But she didn't stop there. She followed them, straight to my driveway. Her voice carried across the street. "This is exactly what I mean," she shouted. "Certain people don't respect community standards." Half the neighborhood peeked through blinds. I stepped outside, my phone already recording. "Karen," I said evenly, "can you cite the specific bylaw justifying ongoing suspension for Lot 47? Her face twisted. "This isn't about bylaws. It's about values. People like you don't belong here if you can't follow rules." 3 neighbors froze mid-step. Mrs. Chen, our elderly neighbor, gasped audibly. The Johnsons, a young black couple, exchanged horrified looks. Karen didn't realize her mask had slipped, and now the whole block had seen it. That night, I sent the video to the HOA board. Calm, professional, fully documented. I listed every timestamp and attached witness statements. By Tuesday, an emergency board meeting was scheduled. The air in the community center that night was heavy, thick with tension, and the sour smell of burnt coffee. Karen showed up with her husband Brad, the city councilman. She wore her usual white outfit, as if purity could hide corruption. Her defense was predictable. She was protecting the community from outside influences. When the vote came to censure her, it was a 3-3 tie. She abstained, of course. No consequences. Not yet. But the board wasn't the same. I saw doubt in their eyes. Cracks in her control. After the meeting, Maria slipped me a manila envelope. "Financial records," she whispered. "You were right, Dave. There's something big here." That night, under the warm kitchen light, I opened those documents. The pages smelled faintly of toner and dust. What I saw made my jaw tighten. The HOA had been billed over $2. $1 million for construction and amenities that had only cost $1. $4 million to build. $700,000. Gone. Every transaction had one name attached. Karen Mitchell Realty. The woman who banned my nephew from the pool wasn't just power-hungry. She was stealing from every homeowner in Willowbrook, and she had no idea the man she'd tried to humiliate had just found the first thread that would unravel her entire empire. Next move? Time to turn defense into offense. Once I saw the numbers, everything clicked. The overpriced pool, the bloated landscaping fees, the constant fear Karen spread. It wasn't about community standards. It was about hiding a crime. That night, I called Maria and Jim over to my house. The three of us sat in my living room, surrounded by stacks of papers and the smell of strong coffee. Miguel sat quietly nearby, phone in hand, ready to document everything. "This isn't petty theft," I said, tapping the spreadsheets. "This is systematic fraud. $700,000 siphoned from construction budgets, and we're all paying the price through inflated HOA dues." Maria nodded grimly. "And she's been covering it up for years." Quote. Jim rubbed his temples. "Good Lord, Dave, if this is true, we could lose the whole HOA charter." Or I said, we could save it. We formed a plan that night, quiet, methodical, airtight. Maria would gather every invoice and compare it with public records from the developer. Jim would call a, quote, special financial review under his authority as president. I'd prepare a legal brief that any prosecutor could use without rewriting a single line. And Miguel? He'd make sure everything was documented online, backed up, and time-stamped. Karen had used fear to control this neighborhood. Now transparency would undo her. But Karen wasn't about to go down quietly. 2 days later, code enforcement officers showed up at my door during Miguel's graduation party. 20 family members in the yard, balloons, cake, laughter, and there she was, standing smugly beside the inspector. "Sorry, sir," the inspector said, scratching his head. "Got a complaint about unpermitted modifications and overcrowding." Karen folded her arms, her tennis whites gleaming in the afternoon sun. "We take building codes seriously here in Willowbrook." My family fell silent. Miguel's smile vanished. I could feel Sarah's absence like a punch to the chest, but I'd spent 2 decades dealing with people like her. I went inside and came back with a box of documents. "Here are my permits, my inspections, and my final occupancy letter," I said. "Everything approved, signed, and sealed." Miguel, bless him, whispered, "Go live." Within seconds, his phone was streaming the scene to hundreds of viewers. The inspection lasted 2 hours. The officer checked every outlet, pipe, and support beam. When he finished, he sighed and said, "No violations. This house is perfect, ma'am." Karen's face turned scarlet. "Check again," she demanded. "There must be something." The camera caught everything, her shouting, her desperation, her refusal to accept the truth. Viewers flooded the stream with comments. "This woman's crazy. Sue her. HOA gone wild." Quote, "And while she humiliated herself on camera, I noticed something in the inspector's blueprints, numbers that didn't match the real community dimensions. Wrong pool specs. wrong landscaping totals, wrong everything. After the party, Maria confirmed my suspicion. The construction invoices were inflated. The missing $700,000 wasn't an accounting error. It was a cover-up. We spent the next few weeks building the case. Emails, contracts, bank statements. It all pointed back to one person, Karen Mitchell. She'd worked as the developer's exclusive agent, taking kickbacks disguised as marketing bonuses. Every extra dollar billed to the HOA had been funneled through her. "This is enough for criminal charges," I said, sliding the final document across my table. Maria's eyes widened. "Then we take it to the district attorney." But Karen must have sensed we were closing in. The next morning I woke to the sound of glass shattering. My office window. My pool equipment had been slashed, cameras ripped from the fence. My phone started ringing non-stop with blocked numbers and threats disguised as warnings. She was panicking, and panic makes people sloppy. When she finally confronted me in the HOA parking lot, her voice was low but venomous. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Dave. My husband's on city council. Drop this, and maybe we can make a deal." I smiled. "Say that again, Karen, nice and clear." She didn't realize my phone was recording. The next morning at 6 a.m., police cars pulled up to my house again. Same officers, same routine. Karen had filed another complaint, this time claiming I'd threatened her. But I had the entire exchange on audio. When the officers heard it, their faces went stone cold. They turned to her. "Ma'am," one said, "filing false police reports is a criminal offense." That was the moment Karen's empire began to crumble. The district attorney's office opened a formal investigation within 48 hours. Detective Sarah Chen, White Collar Crimes Division, took the lead. Subpoenas went out for every HOA account and vendor contract. Within a week, the evidence poured in, proof of embezzlement, mail fraud, and conspiracy. Even Karen's husband, the city councilman, was tied to the scam. By the time Channel 8 News showed up at our next community meeting, Willowbrook Estates was national news. Karen stood at the front of the gymnasium, pale and shaking, her lawyer beside her. Cameras flashed, residents whispered. The smell of disinfectant and sweat filled the air. She started her usual act, claiming she was the victim, that I was a vindictive widower twisting facts. But when the projector lit up the screen behind me, showing her own emails, subject line, revised amenity pricing, confidential, the room erupted. "This isn't about me," I said into the microphone. "It's about $700,000 stolen from the people in this room." Gasps, whispers, the shifting of chairs, and then Karen snapped. "You people don't understand what it takes to protect property values. Some residents just don't belong here." That was the nail in her coffin. Detective Chen stood. "Mrs. Mitchell, you're under investigation for fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. Please step aside." The cameras caught everything, the look of shock, the tears, the collapse of a tyrant. 6 months later, justice had done its work. Karen pled guilty to federal fraud charges. Her real estate license was revoked, her husband resigned, and Willowbrook recovered every stolen cent with interest. We used the restitution to eliminate HOA dues for 3 years and build the Sarah Martinez Memorial Garden, a place for neighbors to gather, laugh, and heal. Miguel went off to college on a scholarship we created in Sarah's name. The same kid who was banned from the pool now had a future built on the justice his aunt would have been proud of. And me? I finally found peace. Not the kind I'd expected when I moved here, but the kind that comes from standing your ground. The sound of children splashing in that pool again. It no longer reminded me of Karen. It reminded me of Sarah, of healing, of the power of ordinary people standing up to corruption. So if you're watching this and dealing with your own HOA nightmare, remember this. Document everything, know your rights, and never, ever let a bully think they can drown you in their rules. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't anger, it's truth.